and Railroads, and I'm here outside the Surface Transportation Board hearing room, having just testified on a proceeding that the board announced a couple of months ago on whether or not the exemptions that have been granted to various commodity groups, intermodal, boxcar, should be revoked. We testified very strongly that the exemption process has worked. The board is under a statutory mandate, in fact, to seek exemptions and grant exemptions to the maximum extent possible. And that is based on whether or not there is real competition out in the real world where this traffic flows. And
now, Ed, if the board did choose or start a process that eventually lifted some of its exemptions, that would give shippers of those commodities now exempt a chance to go to the board, file complaints over railroad rates and service. Why would that not be good for the economy?
Well, I was accompanied by Professor Bobby Willig, who made a very eloquent statement about how, from an economic standpoint, the best way to regulate the relationship between a buyer and a seller, between a railroad and a shipper, is the marketplace. You let the private marketplace work, and to the extent that the marketplace is working, that leads to the most efficient allocation of resources, to the best and safest service. And so, if you'll pardon the expression, don't mess with success. It is working. There is no evidence that the competition is not there for these commodities. In fact, we presented some evidence that the average revenue variable cost ratio is beneath 150%. And as you know, the jurisdictional threshold is 180%.
And do you question whether the STB has the authority on its own to lift these exemptions?
It is our legal opinion that the statute and the decisions by the ICC would preclude the board from on its own going after revocations. That instead what is necessary is for a shipper or a group of shippers to come in and try to make the case that in this particular market, OD pair, that there is market power, lack of competition for a railroad, that that railroad is abusing that market power, and therefore the government needs to step in. Theoretically, that's possible, and so if, as I testified this morning, if there is some group of shippers out there who believe that, they should come in and make that case and let the board make a determination. But we believe that the overwhelming data support the view that that there is competition there. You allow that competition to work, and as Professor Willig pointed out, that leads to the most efficient allocation of resources. And when the government gets involved, like it or not, it somehow begins to erode the good relationship between customer and supplier, between railroads and our customers.
Now, Ed, also I understand that you and some other rail executives recently went to the White House, met with Austin Goolsbee, the President's Chief Economic Advisor. Who all was in the meeting, and what did it deal with?
Well, you know, this is not some extraordinary event. You know, our job, we believe, is to make sure that policymakers, whether they're in the administration, Capitol Hill, wherever, understand the role that freight railroads play. And one of the things that is somewhat frustrating is that we're not always recognized for the fact that we move 43% of America's freight. And so this was a meeting that was set up to just make sure that the new chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisors was aware that there is a private network out there maintained without government support that moves all this freight. You know, the President has called for a doubling of exports as a way to spur employment growth. We carry a third of exports to port. We want to be part of supporting that initiative to double exports to bring unemployment down, and we just wanted to make sure that, as I say, the new chair of the Council of Economic Advisors was aware of that we're here, and obviously we did begin a discussion about some of the issues that we care about, economic regulation being one of them.
And who else from your industry was there?
Well, we had a larger group scheduled, but the meeting was in the morning after the infamous snow blizzard here, where people took 8 hours to get home. And so only two of our CEOs made it in, Matt Rose Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF, and who is our chair this year, and Wick Mormon from Norfolk Southern, who was our chair from last year.
And do you feel pretty confident that this administration understands your concerns about increased regulation of railroads?
Well, I don't want to speak for the administration, but let me put it this way. It is very heartening to have a president actually use the word railroad in a State of the Union address. Now, he talked about passenger rail, and that's his vision, perhaps more focused in passenger, but maybe without saying it, when he does want to double exports, he also has a vision for freight rail. And what is important is that his Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, Joe Szabo, the head of the Federal Railroad Administration, both have said in numerous occasions, on the record, in public, that yes, America deserves a world-class passenger rail system, but not if it comes at the expense of what is already the world's best freight rail system. And that is a very important policy and a very important mantra that we keep on espousing. You heard this morning perhaps testimony by a representative from the Department of Transportation that the draft National Rail Plan is setting out as a goal that 50% of all freight moving more than 500 miles would move by rail. To me, that's an indication that this administration understands the role we play, not only economically, but also easing congestion, energy and environmental goals, and helping create employment.